The town of Ainsley, once a modest yet bustling outpost in the northern reaches, fell silent under the iron grip of a new, terrifying reality. Mercenaries, armed to the teeth and backed by unknown foreign sponsors, had descended upon it without warning. Their arrival was marked by swift violence, government officials executed, communication towers destroyed, and a broadcast sent to the world, demanding total withdrawal of all national forces from the surrounding territories. The footage was brutal. Grainy videos of masked men dragging villagers from their homes, black smoke rising behind them as structures burned. The invaders called themselves the Black Veil, and their message was clear. They intended to carve out a dominion by force. Their emblem, an ashen skull over a red sun, soon haunted every corner of Ainsley's once familiar streets. Across the ocean, in a command post surrounded by maps and satellite feeds, Ibrahim Traoré watched in silence. His jaw tightened as he listened to the translated audio of the mercenaries' demands. Despite being far from his homeland, on assignment overseeing security protocols for a UN-led operation, he knew exactly what this was: a strategic, deliberate occupation of sovereign land by a force that answered to no law but its own. Before we dive into this powerful true story of strategy, courage, and redemption, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more incredible narratives like this one. Reports flowed in from panicked sources, refugees crowding the main roads, supply routes cut, military patrols disappearing without trace. International powers condemned the action but hesitated to intervene directly. Bureaucracy stalled any meaningful response. While leaders debated, the people of Ainsley suffered. Traoré's eyes never left the screen. He saw more than just a territorial loss. He saw a test of will, of purpose, of sovereignty itself. No one would come to help in time, and if they did, it might be too late. Something inside him moved with certainty. He didn't wait for orders. He began gathering intel, reaching out to contacts forged over years of strategic operations. Former comrades, intelligence officers, local leaders who trusted him with their lives. There was no official green light. There was only the truth. That action had to be taken now or not at all. The images kept coming, families forced into labor, schools turned into command posts, churches desecrated. The Black Veil established control not only through weapons, but by instilling fear and hopelessness. It was psychological warfare at its most calculated. At night, Traoré sat alone reviewing maps of the region. The terrain was unforgiving, dense ridges, river valleys, narrow passes perfect for ambushes. But he saw what others couldn't: weaknesses. The mercenaries were efficient, but arrogant. They underestimated local knowledge, dismissed the land as merely strategic space, rather than a living, breathing territory that could turn against them if guided by the right hands. Traoré's mind was made up. He would form a team, not an army, not a parade of flags and uniforms, but a ghost unit, silent, surgical, relentless. He would move without banners, speak only in action, and answer to no one but the mission. He stood at the edge of the decision, knowing what it would cost him if he failed: reputation, command, maybe his life. But in that silence, he heard something louder than fear, a promise. That no land should be left to darkness, that every forgotten town deserved to be remembered. The operation would begin, and it would begin now. Traoré didn't waste a second. With diplomatic ties limiting overt action, he operated in the shadows, reaching out through encrypted channels to trusted allies scattered across borders. The first to respond was Kaelo Duya, a Kenyan reconnaissance expert with years in desert warfare. Then came Elena Varga, a Serbian intelligence officer known for her unconventional tactics. Each contact knew the mission's risk and came anyway. From the outskirts of Niamey to a remote base in Bamako, they convened in secrecy, bringing experience forged in the world's harshest conflicts. None wore the same uniform, none bore insignias. They were bound by one purpose: reclaim Ainsley and dismantle the Black Veil. Their first task was to understand their enemy. Satellite data and intercepted radio chatter painted a picture of mercenaries operating with military precision. But there were gaps Traoré intended to exploit. Supply lines came through a single desert corridor vulnerable to disruption. Surveillance relied on drones flown from 2 makeshift towers in the Eastern Highlands. Communications were tight, but not impenetrable. While the others analyzed positions and movement patterns, Traoré outlined a different layer of the mission, the heart. He spoke not of targets, but of the people. "We're not just reclaiming ground," he told them. "We're returning home to the people who never had a choice in this war." Night after night, they mapped every route, wind pattern, elevation. They studied the old irrigation canals near the northern riverbeds, narrow tunnels once used by farmers, now potential entry paths. The team planned with an intensity born of urgency, knowing the longer the occupation lasted, the more the people would suffer. As they prepared, Traoré's past came into focus among his team. Many knew of his rise through the ranks, his refusal to become a puppet of power, his decision to focus on restoring agency to communities rather than serving personal ambition. But few knew about Koudougou. Years earlier, in the town of Koudougou, Traoré had led an operation to free civilians from an insurgent faction. The mission had succeeded, but at a cost. 17 villagers were killed due to a last-minute intelligence failure. Since then, he had vowed, never again would he let miscalculation cost innocent lives. His leadership now was not built on glory, but on atonement. That same weight guided every decision he made. When the team proposed a fast aerial insertion, Traoré vetoed it, too visible. When they suggested direct sabotage of the drone stations, he warned of possible retaliation on civilians. He wasn't here to destroy. He was here to liberate, precisely and quietly. The biggest threat, however, was technological. The Black Veil had access to thermal detection, signal interceptors, and drone swarms. They used predictive algorithms to anticipate rebel behavior. It was clear. Brute force would fail. The only way to outmaneuver them was to become invisible. So Traoré turned to the environment. He studied the seasonal winds, calculating the arrival of a sandstorm predicted within 2 weeks. That storm would become their cloak. It wasn't a delay, it was opportunity. Under its cover, they would cross into the zone and sever the mercenaries' lifelines. To prepare, they trained in silence, rehearsing each movement, each signal, each retreat. No words wasted. Each team member memorized routes, fallback points, and extraction protocols. The mission depended on trust, not orders. With every detail finalized, the team stood before a hand-drawn map on an old plywood board. Traoré looked at them one by one, then pointed at Ainsley's name at the center. "This is not just a dot," he said. "It's a pulse, and we're going to bring it back." The clock had started. The blueprint was ready. The storm was coming. The storm arrived 3 days earlier than expected. A dense wall of sand and heat swept across the northern valleys, blotting out the sun and silencing the sky. To most, it was chaos. To Traoré and his team, it was the long-awaited veil. With faces wrapped and gear sealed, the unit moved like shadows along forgotten trails. Communication was minimal. Each step had been rehearsed. They traveled by foot and light vehicles, avoiding roads and surveillance zones. Their goal wasn't confrontation, it was position. By nightfall, they reached the old irrigation tunnels on Ainsley's eastern fringe. The map was accurate. The passage, though tight and partially collapsed, was still navigable. Crawling through dust and damp stone, they advanced toward the outskirts of the town, inch by inch, undetected. When they emerged, the silence was surreal. Ainsley had become unrecognizable. Banners of the Black Veil fluttered from rooftops. Armored vehicles blocked intersections. Checkpoints stood at every major crossing, manned by masked figures with glassy eyes and cold fingers on triggers. There was no room for mistakes. They split into micro-teams. Kyle's group surveyed supply depots. Elena and her informant met with villagers in hiding, gathering real-time data. Traoré stayed with the central team, navigating through alleys and shadows, observing the mercenaries' habits, how they moved, how they rotated shifts, where their attention drifted. What they found shook them. Dozens of families had been relocated to the central district under the guise of protection. In reality, they were hostages, shield walls meant to deter assault. Children were made to carry water to outposts, elders forced to cook for the invaders. The human cost was heavier than they'd feared. Traoré called for a temporary halt. They couldn't proceed with the plan as it stood. An assault now would put too many innocents in the crossfire. Morale wavered. The weight of doing nothing pressed against their discipline. But Traoré remained firm. "We came to liberate, not destroy," he reminded them. Using micro-drones disguised as birds, they documented the compound layouts. Patterns began to emerge. The mercenaries were overconfident. Their inner circle trusted their tech too much. Patrols followed rigid schedules, and deeper still they relied on a single relay hub to coordinate drone surveillance. That night, with cloud cover thick and the wind howling, the team initiated their first move. No explosions, no gunfire, only silence and precision. They neutralized the southern relay post using a timed EMP burst smuggled in a sack of rice. The blackout lasted only 90 seconds, but it was enough. Under that brief curtain of darkness, they slipped into the outer district and dismantled two key checkpoints. Unarmed guards were subdued, weapons confiscated, communications tapped. Still, not a single alarm was raised. The mercenaries had no idea anyone was even there. But victory has a price. By the following morning, Le Chacal, the Black Veil's elusive leader, received word of the relay disruption. Known for his ruthlessness, he acted without hesitation. He assembled civilians in the town square, accusing them of aiding ghosts. 10 were executed on the spot. The news reached Traoré within the hour, his fist clenched around the receiver. Every second they delayed cost lives. But charging in blindly would only bring more death. He knew they were outmatched in weapons, not in resolve. Strategy would be their only salvation. The team regrouped at a safe house beneath an abandoned granary. Faces were grim. The mission was no longer just tactical, it was now deeply personal. They had drawn blood without being seen, but the enemy had responded with fire. And so, with dust still in the air and sorrow thick in their lungs, they prepared for the next phase. Dawn broke over Ainsley with an eerie stillness. The sandstorm had passed, leaving a muted haze that blanketed the streets like ash. But something had shifted. Traoré and his team had spent the night positioning charges, severing links, and blocking retreat paths. Now, as the first rays cut through the dust, the final phase began. The first strike came from the eastern ridge, a controlled detonation that collapsed the main road in and out of the town. The second targeted the drone command tower, now reduced to molten wreckage. Panic erupted among the mercenaries. Communications failed, orders scrambled, their confidence cracked. Traoré led the charge through the western corridor, flanked by Kale and 2 local resistance fighters, who had joined in secret. Using stolen access codes, they slipped past the inner checkpoint and reached the administration block. It was here that many hostages had last been seen. Gunfire erupted on the north side. Elena's team had triggered the diversion, drawing half the mercenary force away. With smoke rising and chaos spreading, Traoré pushed deeper into the compound. Inside the main hall, resistance was fierce. The mercenaries fought not with coordination, but with rage. Cornered and surprised, they fired wildly. Still, Traoré's unit advanced with control, each movement measured, each shot deliberate. Midway through the offensive, a call came over their private line. Le Chacal had been sighted. The commander was holed up in the old municipal building, guarded by elite fighters and using hostages as shields. Traoré didn't hesitate. He broke off from the main group, taking only Kale with him. The building was fortified, but they had the element of momentum. They advanced floor by floor, neutralizing guards silently, reclaiming ground inch by inch. Finally, they reached the top level, an office turned into a makeshift war room. Le Chacal stood behind a row of monitors, pistol drawn, a boy no older than 10 bound to a chair before him. His eyes were wild, his voice cold. "You think you can erase what I've built?" he snarled. Traoré didn't answer. He stepped forward slowly, disarmed, his hands raised. Kyle flanked the room, silent as a shadow. The standoff lasted only seconds, but it felt like an eternity. Then, in a blur of motion, Kyle fired, a precise shot to the wrist. The pistol dropped. Traoré lunged forward, pulling the boy to safety. Le Chacal swung a blade, catching Kyle across the ribs. The room erupted in close combat. The fight was brutal. Le Chacal moved with fury, but Traoré with purpose. Years of discipline met raw aggression. Finally, with one clean motion, Traoré brought the mercenary down, pinning him to the floor. "This is not your land," he said quietly, "and you will never hold it again." Outside, the battle raged on. The remaining mercenaries, leaderless and disoriented, began to falter. Many fled into the surrounding hills. Some surrendered to local militias now rising in defense. The tide had turned, but the cost was real. In the final push, during the last advance on the south wall, Elena was hit. A sniper round. She fell in silence, cradled by one of the villagers she had helped save days earlier. The team found her minutes later, already gone. Traoré knelt beside her, pressing her radio into her hand one last time. He whispered something no one else heard. Then, standing, he gave the order. "Raise the flag." And so they did. A cloth of peace, stitched by locals before the invasion, lifted high above the central square. The town watched in silence. Then, one by one, people stepped into the streets, heads bare, tears on their faces, voices rising in prayer. Ainsley had been reclaimed. The silence after battle is unlike any other. It's not peace, it's the slow return of sound, of breath, of life, re-entering a place where death nearly claimed everything. In Ainsley, that silence was broken first by footsteps, then murmurs, then laughter. Children re-emerged from hiding, blinking in daylight. Doors creaked open, smoke cleared. Traoré didn't celebrate. There were bodies to bury, homes to rebuild, wounds to tend. He directed his team not toward rest, but to action. Medical tents were raised using salvaged tarps. Water sources were tested, reconnected. The town's few remaining teachers were called upon to gather the children, to start lessons again, even if only with chalk on broken walls. He insisted that Ainsley not be left as a symbol of destruction, but transformed into one of resilience. International aid soon arrived, but Traoré made it clear locals would lead the rebuilding. "We protect what we build," he said, and they did. Engineers from the region helped restore power. Farmers returned to their fields. Women formed committees for health, education, and safety. News of the mission spread quickly. But it wasn't just the victory that caught global attention. It was how it had been done. No flags waved, no footage glorified the violence. There was no parade. Instead, footage captured by local journalists showed something deeper: collaboration, protection, and restraint. In major capitals, analysts debated the implications. Could such missions redefine intervention models? Was this the future of localized resistance and sovereign action? Military journals published pages dissecting every tactical detail. But among the people, the conversation was simpler. They spoke of the man who came without asking, stayed without demanding, and left only when the people stood on their own again. 1 week later, Le Chacal was handed over to a regional tribunal. He did not speak during the hearing. His empire of fear had ended not with a final battle, but with a community that refused to remain broken. His name faded quickly. Ainsley's rose. Traoré, for his part, declined every award. He disappeared from public sight once his team disbanded. Some say he returned to his original post. Others believe he's training a new generation of tacticians across the continent. Wherever he is, his message remains. In a rare recorded interview, he said only this: "Liberation isn't a flag or a line on a map. It's a child going to school without fear. It's a mother sleeping without listening for footsteps outside. It's knowing that your silence won't be taken for weakness, but for peace." The team he assembled eventually reunited at Elena's grave. They planted a tree in her honor beside the river that now flowed clean again. Her name was etched into stone, but her legacy lived in every family she helped protect, every lie she exposed, every truth she gave her life for. The town of Ainsley holds a festival each year now, not for victory, but for renewal. Children paint murals, elders share stories, songs once silenced by fear fill the air again. The past is remembered, but the future, finally, is theirs to shape. If this story moved you, if it made you feel the power of quiet strength and bold humanity, we ask you to subscribe to our channel for more stories that matter. Your support helps us bring light to real stories like this one. And don't go just yet. Click the next video on your screen to discover another powerful journey of resilience, leadership, and hope. You won't want to miss what comes next.